We've now changed locations to a bigger water. In this place, it's a beach in Denmark, but this could be any large still water where you need to cast far. We've changed locations to have a look at a technique called the double haul. The double haul is a technique which is primarily associated with longer casts and shooting line. But in fact, it's a technique that does a lot more for you, so it's well worth learning. Let's have a look at the double haul. The double haul is a great technique which, once you've learned it, you'll be using it in all sorts of different situations. Not only to cast far, but even if you're just casting 7 meters to a rising trout in a small river. It's a great technique which greatly improves your line control. The double haul is a technique where you use your line hand to more than just hold the line. You bring it into play to help you speed up the line. This will give you more distance, but it will also give you a much better line control. Let's try and break down the double haul into different sections. I have the line lying out here in front of me. It's straight and I have the rod tip close to the surface, so I'm in a good position to start any normal back cast. But instead of trapping the line under my rod hand, I grab the line with my line hand, in this case my left hand, and then as I move the rod hand back, I move the line hand downwards in the opposite direction of the rod hand. Let me show you that again. I'll just bring out the line. The line is straight, the rod tip is close to the surface, and now watch as I bring my rod hand back into the back cast. I move my line hand in the opposite direction. And ideally, you want to try and match the two movements so that you match the acceleration of the rod in your line hand, so that the line hand also slowly accelerates and actually also comes to the same stop as the rod hand. A really good way of practicing and learning the double haul is to break down the forward cast and the back cast into two different parts by allowing each cast to fall onto the water or even the grass if you're practicing out on a field or on your lawn. I simply, when I practice this, I keep my casts in the horizontal plane to begin with. So as before, my line is lying straight. I'm ready to begin my forward cast. I pick up the line, and as I make the forward cast, I haul in the opposite direction. It looks like this. And I simply let the line fall. Now, before I make my back cast, I must remember Bill Gamel's essential about removing slackline, because you can see now that I have a lot of slackline here. So what I do is simply I take a couple of steps to the side to eliminate this slackline. Once again, I'm ready to start my back cast, and again I remember to haul in the opposite direction of the rod movement. So I'd go like this. Once again, I remove my slack line by stepping sideways. Just pull out the line against the surface tension and I make a forward cast. That's a very nice way of breaking each movement into their own sections. That way you can concentrate on each of them instead of having to concentrate on doing them both in the same motion. The next step in learning the double haul is to learn what is known as the follow-through. The follow-through is where you, instead of just letting your line hand remain down here at the end of the haul, you follow through, you sort of feed the line through the rings. It's very important that you do this at the line's own pace, so to speak. That eliminates your slack line, which is one of Bill Gamel's essentials, and it allows you to instantly again make your next cast and follow through. Follow through, haul, follow through, follow through. Now watch if I follow through too quickly. you'll see that a lot of slack line occurs between my line hand and the first guide of the rod. Instead of following through at the line's own pace, this gives me much more line control. When you work on your follow through and the double haul, don't use too much line and don't worry too much about your loops. They will come together eventually when you work on this cast. Once you've mastered both the haul and the follow through, you're ready to begin practicing putting it all together into a real false cast. Now, to begin with, I strongly advise that you still keep the rod low so you can see what happens. This is what it looks like. Instead of letting the line fall on the water, I simply pause the correct amount of time, allowing the line to straighten both on the forward cast and the back cast. I make my haul, follow through, haul, follow through. An added bonus on working on this technique in this exact way is that you're actually also teaching yourself how to cast under trees and bushes, because this is exactly how that's done. Once you've worked on that and you feel that you have it under control, you can begin working on casting it higher up into the air, rising the rod up into a more normal casting position. What I'm trying to do here is to show you how much line control the double haul gives you. I was just carrying an amount of line without hauling, and although I could do it, I was using a very long casting stroke and I was actually using quite a lot of force. But let me show you how easy it looks and how much more line control I gain when I use the double haul. Again, without the double haul, and again with the double haul. So let's have a look at adapting this technique, the double haul, to a longer cast. First of all, I'm going to need a little bit more line, because what's very important with the double haul is that you must match the speed and the length of your haul to the amount of line in the air, just as you always match your casting stroke to the amount of line in the air and to the bend in the rod. So here I'm just casting a short length of line. I'm using a very short stroke, and as you can see, the double haul is little more than a flick of the wrist. That is, I'm matching the haul and the casting stroke to each other. And notice how the double haul here is continually helping me eliminate slack line in my cast. That's another very important point of the double haul. It helps you eliminate slack line. As I lengthen the line, I use a longer stroke and I use a longer double haul. I'm continually matching the length and the speed of the haul to the length and the speed of the casting stroke. Let's have a look at the timing of the double haul. There are different ways of doing this, but generally, especially when you're learning, I recommend that you start the haul together with the casting stroke, like this. Another very important point is, when exactly do you finish the haul? What really happens is that when you're making your forward cast or your back cast, your rod is bent, or as we say, it's loaded. So what you're actually doing is that you're hauling against the loaded rod. So ideally, you want to finish your haul just as the rod straightens. Now, if you look at a fly cast in very, very high speed, slow motion, you will actually see that when your hand stops, the rod is still a little bit bent. So ideally, what you're looking for is the haul to continue just ever so slightly beyond the stop of the rod before you stop the haul and release the fly line.